Right, we are here today with the infamous Mike Mihalski from Sons of Liberty Gunworks. You guys have been in the news quite a bit here this last part of the year in 2025. I am super interested to dig into the new hotness on the rifle front here. So why don't you give us a quick opening volley, at least initially, about Sons of Liberty and kind of like a little bit of the origin story of the brand and where you guys are now.
Yeah. So, I mean, the brand, I mean, the company started a little over 11 years ago in my garage, and I got a knock on the door from the ATF, and they're like, "Hey, you should probably get a license." I think I had shipped like 50 rifles or something out of my garage. I mean, it was all for buddies of mine, and like it was, like it was active duty military guys or whatever. This is during the like Sandy Hook ruts where you could not buy a gun. There was just nothing, and like your options were like DPMS and stuff like that. So I was, putting together some decent rifles, and then I got a knock saying like, "Hey, this is basically your one warning." And not long after that, Son of Liberty was born out of the necessity to stay out of prison.
It was my New Year's resolution not to go to the Fed.
Yeah. So, but what's wild, man? I mean, 11 years ago, a little over 11 years ago, we're in the garage. Like now, you fast forward, we're in 22 countries. We have over 400 and something law enforcement agencies. And I mean, we just were awarded, I think, the most prestigious military contract in the world. So it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah. Well, and we know that when you start, it's one thing to get law enforcement agencies to adopt a rifle. That's a big win, but it's like in comparison to getting the US military, and especially at the highest levels of the US military, for them to pick your product out of a lineup, you're competing against legacy brands that have been in the game for decades and decades, right?
We were in a 2-year competitive down select against some of the best companies in the world, competing for the most coveted military contract on the planet. And they don't select guns based on something arbitrary. At the end of it, once everything is down selected, so the final top whatever, those guns are going to the Army Research Lab. They're going to Crane. They're going to labs where they're going to be subjected to testing that I think most people clearly the commercial market does not understand the level of testing that something has to be done to be selected by entities that do this kind of job. And again, to address some of the stuff that I've read, the places that we are competing for are not price sensitive. This is not a lowest bidder kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I mean, some of the optics that go on top of the gun are almost $100,000. I mean, the gun is the clip on, so this was not a lowest bidder thing. This was not some end of the year expenditure. This was a 2-year competitive down select against some of the best companies in the world, for something that any company on the planet would love to put in, on their secret resume.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting also because I think back on it, and you and I actually cross paths probably in fairly early stages of this at SHOT Show 2024, because I had swung by your table at Yardbird and said hello to you, and I know you were with some of the boys from that program, and I'm like, when I look back on it now, I'm like, oh my God, I remember seeing conversations at SHOT Show that probably pertain to where this ended up. So it's funny how the timeline, people don't realize how long, this wasn't just like they went online, did some research and selected something in the last calendar year. Like this is a long, long
Yeah,
tail.
yeah. We didn't log into our email, and there was like a purchase order. Like it's a bit more involved than that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I think of it from, I mean, I've been in this situation, and I would contend that our barrier to entry is a lot lower on the holster and accessory market side of things. Like the risks aren't as high. Nobody talks about the fact that it's like there's programs where you develop a product in pursuit of a contract like this, and then you don't win. And it's like you still invested the money and the time and the resources, and it's like the opportunity cost of what happens if you didn't get it. And it's
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
still something.
that was an internal debate within my own company for a long time about how we were going to pursue this. And I'll be honest. I mean, I pretty much, I think, staked my, or kind of my stake in the company on this, in the sense that the R&D dollars, the amount of stuff we destroyed. I mean, like, destroying literally tons of Armod steel trying to get the heat treat right. The stuff we had testing for saltwater corrosion, every coating on every substrate you can imagine. I mean, like we multiple iterations of geometry for form factor and everything else has had to go through, or trying to reduce weight, or the like heat mitigation. Like the Mark 1 stays cooler under a heavy course of fire than about 30% cooler than anything else, we tested or tried. So I mean, like, getting a rifle to be able to stay cool for that kind of string of fire, or say I shouldn't say stay cool, but not get so hot that you have to set it down. Through a loadout, like that kind of stuff was hard. The ammo cost alone. I mean, dude, here's some stories that people probably never heard. I mean, I went to the hospital for like acute lead and copper poisoning from the amount of shooting I was doing during the development of Mark 1. I mean, I went to the hospital for that. Not bitching or complaining. It was
No, but
by far the coolest project I've ever worked on. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever personally worked on. But yeah, and then internally there was doubt about whether or not we could pull this off. If it was a long shot, if the other companies were competing against number one, they had the pedigree for decades. They have internal labs. They had their own. They had decades of, I guess, testing on specific things that maybe they didn't necessarily have to redo or be novel. Like, I mean, the Mark 1 from the ground up for us, is novel. The rifling that we're using, some of the materials and coatings that are being used in the rifle, and I mean, like, that profiles over and barrel profiles over and over and over again until you found the one that was the lightest possible profile you could use that had no suppressor, like dramatic suppressor shift. I mean, one day I should do a video just on the pile of shit that's laying here in the scrap bin and then also, well, those guys are just assemblers. Fuck you. You serious? Like, I love, my engineers would disagree. Like all the stuff that we had to destroy or to prototype and model for this. Like, yeah, no, no.
yeah, it's not. Well, I think it's very easy to assume that it's similar to. I mean, we all know of a local gun store where they build a few rifles in the back, right? And it's like, okay, so you've got an SOT, you're gonna make rifles, but all you're doing is just bolting stuff together. It's a very different thing
So
to do what
I
you
mean,
guys are talking about, where you're you're creating a brand new. I mean, it's a stoner platform, but there's a pretty significant departure in a lot of ways, from my understanding.
yeah, I mean, one of the requirements for this was backwards compatibility. So, I mean, we have an entire suite of tech that we developed along with Mark 1. Like the Mark 1 that's available right now, that is an iteration of it. There's an M-car version of it, which is a maritime car. There's other environment stuff, and there's also stuff that was. I have to be careful how I say this because we are currently in competitive down select for many other programs. If backwards compatibility was not something super high on the requirements, then there is different geometry and things you can use, which would probably give you somewhat of a performance leap. But does that performance leap outweigh the logistical issue of having to, you to not have backwards compatibility with legacy systems, or if these rifles find themselves somewhere on the planet, which I don't, the general public does not know this, nor probably should they, and it's not, but on any given day, somewhere on the planet, there are people doing something, So I mean, like, it's not on the news, it's not whatever. But I mean, like, these things don't just sit on a rack somewhere, right? But if you needed an extractor or a bolt or something like that in a place where there is no support, there is no depot level armory, there is no nothing. I mean, there might be an M4 laying around on the ground or something, like, so backwards compatibility for this program was desired.
Well, so this actually touches on something that I am curious about, which is, I know that there are times where you get a requirement from the client where they're like, we want this, this, this. It must have these things. It's nice to have these things, but, they're not necessarily a requirement per se. And then there's other stuff where sometimes the requirements document is driving you, and sometimes you are driving the requirements document because like your innovation gives you something that the client sees and they're like, oh yeah, actually we want that to be part of this thing. How much of the Mark 1 is a reflection of like built to the requirement, and how much of it is the Mark 1 moved the requirements because of what it could do?
I mean, there is nothing arbitrary on that rifle. Not a single second of machine time was spent on anything cosmetic. Not one. Everything on there It has a very specific purpose. And again, like I think there are elements of the general public that do not understand that rifle because there's no way in hell it would ever necessarily apply to them. Now, what's cool about the gun is that it has all of these features and it has all of the things that were that were required and requested by the client. But having them on the gun does not limit. Like it's nice that the rifle has all of it, and having all of that does not in any way diminish from the rifle. If you're not going to use one of those features, well, it doesn't get in the way of something. It's not preventing you from. That was the whole point. The whole point was that the rifle it was truly built so that the operator could do whatever they want to with that gun. Historically, before the Mark One, you put stuff on a gun where the gun allowed you to put stuff. This thing, continuity on the top rail or like the cable routing or the scalloping or just, adding extra pick slots. I mean, all of that little stuff there was specifically requested. I'm pretty sure, I know for a fact it was requested of all vendors. Aggressive fencing around controls and stuff was requested of all vendors. There were some things that we did on the Mark One that were not necessarily requested, but we found through our own testing was objectively better, like 5/8 threads on a 5.56. 5/8 threads on a 5.56, barrel objectively perform better for precision, especially under heat, under heavier courses of fire. And so like that wasn't necessarily a requirement. That was something that we suggested and they accepted to try. But I do think I have a prediction. Here's a wild ass prediction. I don't know if this thing is going to launch before SHOT Show or not. Is this podcast going to launch before SHOT?
Yeah, we'll launch it well before SHOT.
Okay. I have a prediction. I have a feeling that there are going to be a lot of rifle companies coming out soon with intentional, deliberate cable routing. I have a feeling that continuity on the top rail is going to become, a lot more normal. I think that 5/8 threads on a 5.56 gun are going to become, I think it's going to become the industry standard. I think that effort going into heat mitigation is probably going to be important for, anybody that wants to be competitive in this space. I think that like using substrate materials that are inherently corrosion resistant, I bet you that is going to start becoming a lot more popular on guns that want to be competitive in this space. So for the folks that dismiss some of these features as like unimportant or, well, Big Dick Tactical did that one time. And they're just, someone's already done that. Like, no one's ever done it. No one's ever done it all in one platform where every single one of those things was addressed. And these things were not addressed like, for the hell of it. These were problems that were observed throughout combat for the last 20 years on how, stuff. I mean, getting a negligent discharge on a white light, if you're in a place maybe you're not supposed to be, like that's a big problem, right? So like making sure that like nothing can get frayed and moisture can't get in there and you have some type of like, circuit issue or you get some kind of like, short and you have like those are problems that needed to be fixed. Weight, of course, the reliability and endurance of the gun, like I said, different environmental considerations. And on top of that, not only are you fixing problems from like the last perhaps 20 years of observed issues, you're also preemptively building the gun for what's about to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. And again, I have to be careful how I phrase this, but the next 5 to 10 years for small arms is going to be really exciting. There's a leap happening right now. This is not an incremental improvement. There is a massive leap in the lethality of these platforms. If you look at maybe new ammunition that might be coming along, or you look at what the guns can do, or you look at how the visual augmentation systems incorporate with the rifle all together, like in a package deal, what that's allowing our warfighters to do. And so the Mark One was built from the ground up to fix those problems from the past, preemptively get ready for what's happening in the future and tie it all in. And I've done my best to like kind of explain this. I get it. It's lost upon some elements of the commercial market, but I think that it will become clear how important it is whenever every other company that wants to be competitive here starts to adopt those little features that may seem unimportant. But we'll see how damn important they are if they've changed their own designs.
Yeah, I think that's one of the struggles with being the first cat to do something. There's a quote, I don't remember who it was. It's like, first they call you crazy, then pretty soon you're crazy if you're not doing it that way. And it's like, this is to me, you guys, it's one thing where if you had decided to build this rifle without this particular client being the driving force behind it, I think it would have been insane to even attempt it because you had been trying to reshape the entire market.
Well, I'll be completely honest, and I'm not ashamed to say this at all. If I was just sitting around in my basement trying to dream up something, it would never have looked like this. I've never done that job. Like I've never had to fast rope out of helicopters or take down. Long story short, I've never had to do that job. And these particular clients are probably harder on rifles than any other people on the planet in terms of like some elements shoot guns harder. Some, I would imagine this group carries guns harder. Okay. So lot of interesting stuff going on there. Another if I had to come up with this on my own, it would not have looked like this. This is what specific end user feedback looks like in not being so arrogant to not incorporate it. If somebody asks for something, it's not arbitrary. Being a smaller, nimble company able to be responsive, I think, was a huge advantage for us in that, like, if they would have asked me to make the thing levitate, I would have tried, or I would have bankrupted the company. So I mean, like, our default answer was just yes. Another thing that my predictions for stuff that I think you're going to see, dude, 3-groove poly rifling, 3-groove polygonal rifling, I bet is going to be very popular on guns moving forward. 3-groove just in general. And again, I see people debate barrel tech all the time. I will tell you right now that World War II era barrel tech, cold hammer forged, chrome line, 4150, like World War II era barrel tech is not going to cut where it's going. Where things are heading and heading fast, you're going to see different technology emerging soon, not just from us, but from anybody that wants to be competitive in this space. And it might look a little bit like, what the Mark 1 looks like.
Well, so let me ask on the subject of the barrel, and again, you can tell me that you can't tell me the answer to that, but like when it came to barrel length, for example, was that something that the client gave you a range of barrel length that you needed to be within, or was it like they spec'd, we want exactly this length of barrel?
So there's thresholds and objectives, and like what I like about working with certain clients, there are certain programs that we're competing for where things are extremely specific. Okay, where like if like you turn in something that is 1 millimeter over the overall length, that thing goes into the trash can. It doesn't matter. The gun could be invisible and levitate, but it's 1 millimeter over what the requirements are or something. The gun goes into the trash. That's it.
Automatic, yeah.
Yeah, that's the end of it. Thanks for showing up, Mike. Then there are some entities that have a little bit of flexibility, and if the vendors, all vendors have the same opportunity, vendors can articulate why certain things might make sense, or the performance benefit of certain things that we seriously consider, but we seriously encourage them to consider. Then they would probably listen to that, right? So like, let's say going from like a 10.5 gun to an 11.5 gun, everybody wants the shortest gun possible, for maneuverability, for all other kinds of reasons. But if you demonstrate like a mechanical reason why an 11.5 gun, has 40% more dwell, is a mechanically more robust gun, it's a mechanically harder gun to stop, then people might listen to that. Or if you're looking at available real estate on a rail, or whatever that could be. So it just depends, I guess, on what program someone's looking at, to how open the entities are to feedback. Sometimes the scope of work is just defined and it's rigid and that's all there is to it. Or sometimes, they're asking for input back. This depends.
So in this case, then, was this a case where you guys had some input as to the form factor on that barrel length?
I'm personally, I've taught. I'll be careful how I say this. I have taught for years, in my armorers classes and stuff, that if someone offered me 2 identical rifles, one was a 10.5, one was an 11.5, which rifle should you pick? I'm picking the 11.5 every single time. And that is something that is not like, Mike's opinion. I mean, it is legitimately and objectively a more robust rifle in terms of, mechanical function. So I would, I really believe that might be a hill I would die on. I don't know. We'll just say that.
I like that. That's a good answer. And then, was that robustness, is that then also kind of an explanation for the carbon gas, or like where does that fall within like what you guys had spec'd to you and what you guys put together to show to the client?
New suppressor technology, and almost every good, I should say, most suppressors moving forward are being designed with some type of flow technology in mind, or with some type of reduction of back pressure. There's a lot of reasons for that. Mechanically, those cans are much easier on the gun. It does kind of expand your operational envelope a little bit, and you're not having to thread a needle from like a suppressed to unsuppressed setting. Like your Hux cans, for instance, like your Hux Flow 556 or something, that's a commercially available suppressor. You have like maybe at most like a 3% carrier speed increase between suppressed and unsuppressed shooting. So like, is there a need for an adjustable anything? No, like the gun just runs. Furthermore, and this is probably even more relevant, is if you're working with clients that have virtually unlimited ammo, unlimited ammo budget, you know, and if you're talking to people who are encouraged to train a lot, breathing all that shit in, this isn't like a weekend trip to the range, I mean, if you're talking about like thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds for some type of training cycle or something like that, like breathing all that heavy metal and back into the operator's face, I mean, that's got to be causing some issues, especially
You
this
know
might not.
firsthand about that now.
Yeah, well, no, but I'm just saying, like, if someone goes and qualifies at the range once a year, perhaps it doesn't matter. If you're inside structures shooting over and over and over, perhaps it might. So, so again, back pressure and flow is a thing. I didn't mean to go off on that rant, but I wanted to come back to qualify as like the carbine gas system. Now, historically, with traditional baffle stack suppressors, that suppressor would assist in the function of the gun. It would overcome the lack of dwell time. So you could have a mid-length gas system on an 11.5 gun, and the suppressor itself is helping to drive the gun because it has enough back pressure that it's mimicking dwell. Okay, if your suppressor does not mimic dwell, if your suppressor is not assisting in the mechanical function of the gun, then you need that dwell in the traditional place, which is between the gas port and the muzzle. So we went with the carbine gas system because we're pairing it with a suppressor that has a flow technology. And if you want to be able to meet the endurance requirements, remember the gun is not tested clean under optimal conditions, a sunny day. Like the gun has to pass through like negative 40 degrees. I say that not because like, oh, there's ice inside the gun. Okay, whatever. The port pressure at negative 40, that the amount of pressure being forced through the gas port is massively reduced as temperature drops. So like even port pressure at negative 40, is something to consider. Like for the function of the gun. Okay. Or if the gun has to operate, in a sandy environment, like there's sand and shit through the gun has to have enough like mechanical endurance to plow through, OTB. Or what happens when the gun's fired full of water, or what happens when the gun is just going through some destructive firing schedule and it's just firing to failure, you're not cleaning it. Oh, and by the way, the rifle also has to be super shootable. Like the gun also has to track very fast. If you were to measure it objectively against split times from every other gun that's testing, and the Mk1 is saying, oh, I don't know, maybe quite a bit faster on split times, and still plowing through all of that adversity, sand, the Arctic temperatures and fouling and all that kind of shit, but somehow is still faster for like reflexive hammered pairs and shit. Okay, well then that's not just another AR-15. We did something a little different there.
Well, so then that naturally leads to the parallel question, which is we're talking about a community that is for the past several years had a strong association with piston-driven rifles. And so here we are talking about a direct gas gun again. Can you give any insight into what that transition was driven by?
Yeah, so I'm not, and listen, I don't know. I clearly do not know everything. I'm not privy to everything. I mean, I'm only privy to, what my requirements are to do things, right? That's really it. And I mean, and I think, I think vendors and a lot of these other competitive down selects, they at least probably have an idea of who they're going up against. Okay. They like, that's probably, I think, I think everybody knows. I would have, or at least probably maybe not from the entity itself, man, but just from like industry scuttlebutt and stuff. Because I mean, anyways, I don't know a lot of piston guns in these programs. And if you're, here's let me try to put it. I'm trying to be very careful.
I'm tracking.
Yeah, let me say this. Okay, so when piston guns might have been adopted, like the HK416 or something from different places, okay, you're talking about like 20 years ago. And so maybe 20 years ago, okay, that was compared to all of its peers, compared to every AR family of rifle 20 years ago, that might have been like by far the best choice. Like a lot's happened in the last 20 years. Okay, in terms of technology, in terms of like refining how certain things work. So I don't necessarily believe that, apples to apples, we're in the same position that we were 20 years ago. Matter of fact, I know we're not. I mean, I mean, we won. I know we're not. So, um, so for like piston guns, there's a couple of real challenges that you have to consider. Everything from carrier tilt to weight to proprietary parts to just how the gun recoils and cycles. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on with the piston gun that, for whatever advantages you might get from that, I don't think it outweighs the disadvantages from what you're getting with that too. There's no free launch. And so while the piston gun might have, if there were 50 performance metrics, let's just say there were 50. I'm pulling that number out of my ass. Let's just say 50
Yeah.
50 different performance metrics on which a gun would be judged. If one of those piston guns outperformed it in like one or two or three of the performance metrics, but it got crushed in the other 47, well, what gun's going to be selected? So again, like, from the people that review guns online, I wonder what firing schedule and what metrics are they reviewing the guns against. And I can tell you this: if you look at Army Research Lab or Crane or any of the other places that test weapons at the highest possible level, it's not cheap. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think people would be forgetting about all of the actual physical firearm parts and complete guns that you probably destroyed in the process of testing this, just for your own internal ammunition burn that you guys did yourselves before the government was ever involved. I shudder to think what that round count had to have looked like. I mean, it kind of put you in the hospital, right? So it had to have been a shit pile of ammunition you guys went through.
Yeah, I mean, just eliminating different stuff. I mean, like, when we first started out, I mean, I'll be very transparent because we have this tech now, and we have it available to release, I guess, whenever the hell we want, right? But I mean, like the first iterations of stuff that we were using, I was using A21 steel. A21 is a Carpenter steel. It's a very awesome steel. It's probably one of the most corrosion resistant materials on the planet. Imagine it being like a super stainless steel in terms of like how tough it is. A21 is an interesting material, and I mean, we made bolts out of it, we made barrels, all kinds of stuff, a lot of different components, and we tested all through that. And then as we were having challenges with certain heat treat or just different ways of working with the material and the results we were getting, we switched about halfway into Armod, and then we had to start that all over again. So I mean, just the amount of ammo we destroyed going down a path we never even ended up taking. Now we do have A21 that is kind of like in the cubby hole. We do have other stuff that we've worked on. We have several different types of bolts. There are multiple bolts that are compatible with the Mark 1, whether it's materials, geometry, whatever. All of that had to be validated. And before you go and send something off to bet your entire company's future on, internally, I was pretty much betting my job. I mean, we also have a board. We also have investors. I'm the owner and the founder, but I'm not immune to, like, hey,
Yeah,
where's
there are
our fucking,
consequences even for you.
yeah, I mean, where's our fucking money, Mike? So, you know, like, you're not going to send something off that you're not truly confident in. And not only is it the best, not only do you feel it's the best that you're possible, it's not just the best that you feel you have possibly done. You also believe that it's going to be better than whatever else it goes against.
Yeah, and you've got to assume everyone else at all of those other companies is doing the same level of investment as well.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't, you're not talking about like the Cletus County Sheriff's Office or something, right? I would imagine that every company that competes in any of these programs, for the pride of it, wants very badly to win.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it goes onto the secret resume, which is always the tough thing because it's like talking about your accomplishments in a way where it's like, okay, well, I need to brag about this in the right context to the right people. But this isn't something that you can just issue a standard press release.
No, the press, yeah, the press release had to go through contracting officers, had to go through various levels of administrative stuff. The approval for the press release, word for word, had to go through multiple levels of approval before we could put it out. The certain entities, I mean, they want companies to succeed and do well. They know that it's a hard game to play in. Like, so there's a few rules you follow, and you follow. They're hard rules, and you just don't mess that up. But I mean, to be able to explain that Sons Liberty was selected in a competitive down select for a very prestigious contract, I'm very much allowed and proud to say that.
Well, and it's amazing to me because I watch the, I was never in the rifle accessory game. I was always in the concealed carry accessory game, and like rifles were just a hobby for me. And so keeping up with what was the new hot shit in the industry was just part of the hobby aspect. And I look at how much things have changed since like the GWAT began, but then also you look at like there was this quiet period where there like the drawdown was happening, the GWAT was winding down, pulled out of Afghanistan and Iraq and whatnot. And then now we're seeing all of this new development, largely I would assume being driven by the concern about peer and near peer conflict and what that might look like. It's like everybody I think kind of thought that the AR-15 was pretty much like, okay, that's like a mature technology. That's about as far as it's going to go with it. And now it looks like it's like you thought this was the end, but no, this is a very different thing. And I have to wonder like if you took somebody that was like a, special operations guy from 15 years ago who had a million rounds through a Mark 18 and you handed him the Mark 1, what is his experience? What do you think he's going to notice right away as like some of the biggest differences for him as an end user?
Yeah. So immediately he would notice, weight. He would notice heat mitigation. He would notice recoil management, and just like his split times would be, again, if this is a very competent shooter, which I would imagine it would be if he's at that level, his split times would be objectively faster. The stuff that he is mounting to that gun would feel intuitive. There wouldn't be awkward stuff hanging off. You're not trying to modify something to fit somewhere. I mean, everything would be like completely tight and protected and just very, again, there would be no worries about snagging stuff on slings or on gear, or if that gun's being run on your back, with, while you're doing certain things with your hands or whatever it is, like, that, like just all of the little things that they're nuanced, but when you add them all up, there is no rifle on the planet that has all of it. That has all of it. The Mark One does,
Well, there's
and
one now, yeah.
yeah, and here's the thing: I don't give a shit what the critics say, because go find me a rifle that has solved all of the problems. Now, what I will say is, like, I'll be curious to see what other companies do come SHOT Show when they realize that their rifle is legitimately deficient if it does not have this stuff, depending on the client you're asking for. Now, if somebody wants to go shoot 10 beer cans at their pond, like, do you need all this stuff? Probably not. Well, do you feel like your rifle is deficient if it does not have some of these features? Probably not. But if you're building guns for someone that does need this stuff, then yeah, the other guns are absolutely deficient. This gun will do it better. Or if if you have no interest in exploring where ammo technology is heading, then yeah, your gun is adequate. But if you want to feed the ammo that might be coming down down the way, if you want to feed that to your gun, well, you'll know very quick if I'm lying. You'll know pretty fast if I'm telling the truth. Here's the thing, like, I'm gonna say this. Federal released a cartridge called the 7 Backcountry. Okay, this was like an open source, a big release. They had this giant, press release and everything. And it was so cool that there was already, I don't know, 16 or 18 different companies they launched it with that were rifle companies that were already selling rifles chambered in that. So if you wanted to use that cartridge, you had your choice of, I think, like 17 different rifles that were already ready to go. Okay. This was a bolt action, like, hunting rifle. Okay. And I remember reading the comments about people being like really dismissive of, like, oh, it's just another caliber. Do we need all these new calibers? Or what is this? What does this thing do that this other caliber can't? Blah, 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 blah. and, and I don't get in, I don't participate online in chat rooms as much as I used to, because it really is frustrating and it's probably a poor use of time. I
Takes
don't love
years
their
off your life and stress.
Yeah, but I would have loved to have responded. Well, it does everything that thing can't do. I'm like, they released it to the public so you could buy it off a store shelf at 85,000 psi, which means that that's probably an extremely conservative loading for what that case might be able to do. If they're selling it to the public, right? They're not going to sell something that's like on the ragged edge, of like yield strength or something, right? And so, like, but I mean, think about if you're trying to build a lightweight sheep hunting gun, a sheep gun. You're going to carry into the mountains hunting bighorn sheep or something, or well, maybe you don't need a 30-inch barrel anymore. Maybe you can achieve adequate velocity out of something much shorter. And considering that's That's the where the weight is. Majority of the weight in most rifles is in a barrel. What happens if you could achieve adequate velocity out of a much shorter, lighter barrel? And let's say guns in general just start getting shorter. Well, then I bet optics and stuff might have to get shorter as well. Maybe thermals and stuff has to get more powerful to match the effective range of new ammo or whatever. I would imagine that the entire system is the companies that are competitive are probably leaning into the fact that it's going to look very different very soon.
Well, so even if we take military clients out of the picture for a moment, if you just were talking about like available and emerging technology in this space, it's like realistically, you've got the Mark One, there's commercially available variant, correct? But would it be safe to say then that Mark One, the lessons learned in the Mark One are going to ultimately trickle down into the other guns in the family that you guys produce already? Because if that's where the industry's moving, it would stand to reason that like this is just the very pointy end of the spear.
Yeah, no, yes. Like I would imagine that you would see a oh man, yes, you're gonna see a tech refresh across a lot of the things that we do. Right now, currently, whenever people are trying to compare guns, and I don't mean this in any kind of disrespectful way. This is not a knock on anything. And to be honest, I have a lot of respect for all the companies in this space. Even companies that I dislike, I'm still rooting for them because I have a very much us versus them mentality. Us meaning gun manufacturers, them meaning Bank of America and
Yeah.
Google and insurance companies and stuff like that. Right? I still even companies that we compete against and we may not like each other. I'll still go to bat for them if it's against like I don't know, the rest of the world that's trying to put us out of business. Sorry, I lost track.
No, you were talking about like the within the not just within your company, but also you expect, I think that that's going to start emerging across the board as these other companies. We're all facing the same technical landscape, basically, is what I'm getting from that. Is like the
Yeah, no, for sure, man. So again, materials, different technology, the requirements, basically you say outside of like the military stuff. Yeah, we're gonna have a tech refresh within our own brand. And I remember where I was going with that. I'm sorry. People compare like they're trying to like compare like this gun versus this gun versus this gun. I mean, so they ask like, well, the Geisley Super Duty versus the Mark One. Like, I don't think that like that is not an apples to apples comparison. It's just not. They're very different guns. Now, perhaps if you as an end user, if you don't need some of the things that this gun was built to do, then yeah, fine, no big deal. It's like asking what's the difference between an Accuracy International and a Remington 700 Youth Model. Well, if you're going to shoot a pie plate at 100 yards, there's no fucking difference. You get whatever you want. If you're asking it to do more than that, I think like the Geisley Super Duty and our L89 is a much more accurate and reasonable comparison, apples to apples. The Geisley Super Duty versus the Sons Liberty L89 rifle, that is probably a more reasonable place to do a comparison. As far as the Mark One right now, like the only other rifle that I would maybe say versus, might be like your Surefire like ICAR. Like the Surefire rifle is very interesting. That's an advanced weapon system. Like in my and I say that right.
or yeah, we can hear you fine. You're good.
Now, I would imagine that other guns are going to be coming online, to kind of address some of the same things, and so then perhaps it opens the field quite a bit. I mean, right now, I mean, the Surefire rifle. I think the Dicey has rifles that are like like it's a GFR, or they have some of the other guns. Those are pretty neat. I'm excited to see what Knights is up to. We'll probably see more, like I said, SHOT Show, Ice Off, the places where new tech is emerged. I mean, but just in case anyone's wondering, the Mark One project started 2 years before the public ever saw it. We didn't necessarily just stop development. Like once it was submitted, like I'll give you a little hint, like a Mark Two exists, Mark One, Model Ones, like and if anything, the evolution of technology only compounds. So as you crack certain nuts, man, you keep pushing, you keep, doing stuff, you're learning at a faster and faster rate. And then furthermore, whenever you have a little bit of pedigree, like working with certain clients, if you do go to other industry partners, I'm talking outside of the gun industry. I mean, if we had to go to, I don't know, private space companies or other materials companies that are outside of the gun industry, then you're coming to them with a little bit of credibility of, hey man, I'm excited about like I would like to talk to your engineers about the material sciences based upon this type of need. And they're like, okay, and like this is who we're trying to work with. Okay. And then, because the
Yeah.
gun industry historically has been about 30 years behind every other industry in material science.
Yeah. Well, and I think it touches on something that I've always made the joke about, where there's a million products in this industry where the marketing reads that it was developed for insert your favorite special operations community organization, right? And it's like the joke I've always made is like there's a big gulf in the preposition in that sentence. Developed for and developed at the request of are two very different things. And it's like I can be at home with no knowledge of anyone, like like a Ranger Battalion, but like I can claim that I developed it for them, but they never asked for it. So what difference does that make? But when they pick up the phone and call you and say, "Hey, we need something that does this," there's a very big difference there.
Somebody I've read several people send me stuff all the time, and I mean I don't go out and seek this stuff, but when I read it, it is funny. Is I did not, having been in this space in this community for 11 years, and having what I thought was like a pretty good read on like the commercial market. Like I mean that's where we've operated for 11 years. I honestly thought I understood the commercial market probably a little bit better than I did. I didn't realize how disconnected the commercial market was from like the professional market. I really had no idea. And so people send me things that people, that there's entire threads and comments where people are talking about us or the Mark 1 or whatever. And there's the comments are something like, well, SOCOM has a lot of discretionary stuff. So like they can buy whatever they want. And they probably bought a few of these things to throw in their locker, or they bought a few to test them out. I'm like, no, asshole. Like we released the press conference after months of having to get the actual press release cleared through 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 a lot of places. Not because someone bought some shit to throw in a locker. It happens to be the primary weapon of some of America's, you know, best people. This is the primary weapon of some of the best people whose job is the defense of this country. So no, it's a little more involved than that. Sorry, Reddit.
Yeah, yeah. This is about as America gets. So we need you to.
I mean, yeah. So like I said, it's a point of pride. I didn't realize like I think what it really comes down to, man, is that people have a certain idea in their head of like tier charts, like, AR-15 tier charts, which have always been stupid. They've really been very dumb because they rank guns. Some idiot who has absolutely no weapons testing experience, who's never objectively tested guns before. I guarantee you, these tier charts are not made by the techs at Crane. They're not made by the ARL. They're not made by the FBI laboratory. I guarantee you that the tier charts are made by some idiot who scrolls and looks for the consensus of other idiots. But what a tier chart would be interesting if somebody actually invested the time to establish how something performed for specific metrics. Like, out of these 50 guns tested, what had the most consistent precision across these 10 different types of ammo types, or how. And really, if someone wanted to make a tier chart that was meaningful, it would be a phone book. It would be a phone book of data, in that where gun A outperformed gun B in this test, and gun B outperformed this gun in this test, and so, in the hierarchy of needs, it would be a very hard way to do. So it's just comical. Anyways, I think people have certain ideas and they're very married to that. In the gun culture, it seems that people associate their fucking identity with things like gun brands, which is hilarious because whenever all of us as manufacturers, when I'm talking to my buddies at Knights Armament and I'm talking to the guys, we bump into each other, the guys from Novetzke, we have a working relationship with LMT. Josh from Psionics is a good friend of mine. BCM is an OEM partner on like some of the intermediate buffers we use. When we talk as peers, like the gun manufacturers, we don't discuss things in this term. And
Right.
like something tells me that like Carl Lewis from LMT would not call the or I don't think Reed Knight, or I don't think the dudes at Novetzke or the dudes at Cobalt or the dudes at you name it, wherever, they would not call the Mark 1 a parts gun.
Right.
They would not call it a mid-tier rifle. They would not call an L89 a mid-tier rifle.
Well, I think that really gets to the testing in general is not something that the gun consumer market has ever really. This goes back to the old gun magazines. I mean, gun writers in the old days, remember, there's always like the Mini 14 versus the Bushmaster, and it's like, come on, like that's not. It's all completely subjective, and it's all done just based off of either the editorial needs of the magazine or based off of the preferences of the writer
I
that
mean, a
did the
lot. Well, I
article.
mean, a lot of that shit's also pay to play, man. I mean, whenever you see like brand XYZ voted brand of the year, like that's a very much pay to play type of scenario. I mean, you're an advertiser with that publication or something like that. But I guarantee you, there's no one that I'm aware of that is making some type of really hardcore, dedicated, commercially available testing regimen to be able to provide the commercial market with objective testing results. Like there's not, but I can tell you that there are objective testing results that, if you're buying this for, I don't know, a country,
Yeah.
you know, that, like, it's like, there's not a box you check for fit and finish. There's not, you know, like the
Well,
aesthetic of it, I don't like
well,
that
it's
color.
hard to drill down though on those specs are actually think about it. We were just joking earlier about a thread on Facebook that we were both commenting on where it was like there's talk of testing, but then it was like the testing had already been completed and the conversation was what information would you like these guns ranked by? And it's like, well, don't you think that was important information to create the testing parameters in the first place? The just what you would have to go through to compare three guns on accuracy. Like it's like, well, accuracy what? Off of rest, at what distance? Cold
Well, I
or
can
after
tell
you
you
let
here,
the gun hit the can
and
without a
here
can?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not breaking any rules by saying that this is like. Here's some. Let's just talk about accuracy for 1 second. Let's say that somebody wanted to compare three guns for accuracy. You would probably need at least a sample size of a minimum of five units per gun. So if you wanted to test the Mark 1 against three other rifles, you would need at least five Mark 1s, right? And then against five XYZs and five ABCs, right? So you have sample sizes of that, and then you would shoot opening groups and record with every type of bullet construction that could possibly be fed through that gun. And if it's like a military entity, well, then they know the issued ammo they have, right? So they're testing against the multiple types of issued ammo they have. So you're getting that, and then there's you're testing it at 2,500, 5,000, 2,500, 10,000. It's so like it'd be just on one type of ammo, it's 50,000 rounds just to test the Mark 1, right? Because it's 10,000 rounds per gun per load, right? So then, okay, so that's 50,000. So to test those three rifles, even if you just wanted to pick one round, would be 150,000 rounds. Shot out of a vice, right? There's a fucking machine pulling the trigger. So like, yeah, dude, if that reviewer wants to invest the money on the ammo, I will send him five Mark 1s. I'll happily do it.
I like that. That's a really good call out for a lot of the consumer market guys that have real strong opinions and real weak resumes to back up their opinions. So
Yeah, just go ahead and do that. Just invest 50,000, 50,000 rounds of one type of ammo through five samples of guns, and then measure the group, and then perhaps like the dispersion of that into the test barrel wear, at least to a minimum of 10,000. Now, guns that are going to go on and keep going and through like more of a down select, or they're going to keep, going somewhere else, so there's additional data needed, you're going to need a fucking lot more ammo than that. Because then like that, that's just one metric. All you're testing at that point is what the dispersion was after 10,000 rounds. But what is it after? But now we have to get dispersion data on where does the gun finally stop or die or mechanically, or, when does something break? So I mean, I don't, there's not a lot of YouTube videos out there that are going to be quite adequate.
no, and let's be honest, it would be the driest, most unwatchable content.
Yeah,
No one's
that's
going to sit there
exactly.
and watch.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends, a lot of really close friends of mine have badass YouTube channels, and I love watching it because I mean I learn stuff all the time, and it's super, it's as informative as you can get within the attention span of the average person, and it's infotainment, it's badass, and I love that the gun culture is represented that way. It gets more people into shooting, whatever, and so it's done in a way that's also, like I said, it's infotainment, right? I get it, but yeah, a true objective weapons evaluation test would not be exciting. It would, let's put it in a box and let's fill that box with, with salt fog, and let's see what it does. Like that would not be an exciting test.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what is the interesting thing, like you said, when you're developing for a professional end user, and also a professional end user at a national level versus, like you said, your local sheriff's department is not putting the same testing, but they are able to kind of in some ways piggyback off of the benefits of these larger programs because the highest tier professional end users can help drive the requirements if those smaller agencies are smart and pay attention to what choices were made and why.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like, we share stuff right up until, the point where I can't, right? I mean, so I'm trying,
Me
I try to be as transparent as I can without breaking any, rules. But the cool thing about the Mark One is you put it in like, this is what's hard to convey over, a brochure. This is what's hard to convey over like a video talking about it. You know, I am working with an entity that did some very extensive testing. I am getting their permission to share that. It's a law enforcement entity, but I'm gonna get there. It's probably some of the most extensive I've got. But like I said, like, if you tested it against 10 other guns and thousands of drills were shot to measure split times, that might be compelling to someone who wants to read data. But if you put this Mark One in someone's hands and then they just shoot it, they see how easy it is to shoot. It doesn't get hot. The recoil management is amazing. The gun feels awesome with like that texturing and just like the overall carryability of the rifle. Like the Mark One, even if nobody knew what it accomplished, the Mark One is pretty damn hard to beat when you just put it in someone's hands and let them shoot it against everything else that everyone else submitted. Like we didn't tell the 70 police agencies that have adopted it this year. We didn't tell them really what it had done. We couldn't. I mean, it's damn sure early on. So it won on its own merit, going head to head with every other gun submitted. And if they had the budget to be looking at Mark Ones, they damn sure had the budget to be looking at everything under the sun. And when the Mark One has won pretty much every competitive down select that it's been in, well, that's compelling.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So, given the departure this is from a lot of the legacy product line, is this or do you anticipate any impact on your just overall production capacity of the rest of the product families out there? Or is this like, hey, we build its own production infrastructure in addition to the existing product lines that we already have?
This is the first place. Your podcast is the first place I'm publicly announcing this, but Sons of Liberty just closed last week. Done deal, got the keys. We just bought an entirely new facility that is probably 10 times the size of our current one, or well, several times the size, maybe not 10, but several times the size of our current one. And you are going to see the integration of verticality, not because there's any kind of deficiency in the way that we're currently doing things. Like, I mean, honestly, people don't realize that things are made to our print. Like it's our engineering. Our engineers designed this, and we work together. It's our print, and it's most. And so, even if you have a manufacturing partner help to make that, it's still uniquely yours. That the intellectual property and that stuff is yours. And this isn't like you bought something off the shelf and then engraved your name on it. That's not how it works. But the new facility will integrate certain vertical applications, and we're doing that now simply because of there's a mathematical point to which it makes more sense to invest in the machine time and in the talent to run those machines just to handle the volume. I don't think people realize how fast Suns is growing as a company. Again, let me reiterate, we're in 22 countries. We're in multiple current programs right now for the DoD and other entities. Not just that, the company was very well known in this super entrenched 2A culture, but it really wasn't super known to the average guy walking in off the shop, and asking, what do you got on the wall? That is changing, right? Like the brand awareness is growing, demand is growing. Right now, I remember reading a comment on somewhere, someone was saying, who the hell is going to buy that gun? They're talking about the Mark One. Oh, that's overpriced. Who's going to buy that? I'm like, eventually you, dumbass. That's who's going to buy it. Because right now, the demand for Mark One is far ahead of what, we have the capacity to produce. And so we're building that capacity internally.
Well, and it's exciting, especially given that sort of news in contrast to what a lot of the industry has experienced over the last 2 years because of the contraction in a lot of other categories. Hearing a growth story is very inspiring, and the fact that I'm active on LinkedIn as much as I am on Facebook, and it's like seeing job listings pop up from you guys now for different roles. I'm like that, for the longest time I always thought of it as a very small cadre, and it's seeing you guys are adding headcount is definitely an indicator of there's real growth going on over there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that a little bit. The team that we're building around Sons of Liberty right now is incredible. The first biggest change that people saw, we announced this a while ago, but I'm going to cover down again, is we brought Nate Horvath, who was the CEO of Staccato. He's the guy that built STI into Staccato, right? He was part of the acquisition of STI, and he built it from that to what is now today Staccato, right? I mean, that's impressive. So he has now joined our team. He is our new CEO. We brought Sean Murphy on board. Sean Murphy is our VP of sales. He was one of the dudes that helped stand up Night Force. Before Night Force had even had military contracts, he's legitimately one of the best shooters in the country. I mean, the guy understands high performance equipment, better than most. He still teaches at the very highest levels. We brought on Scott Peterson, right? Scott Peterson, he literally just retired. He retired from the AMU about 60 days before we brought him on. He was the captain of the action shooting team for the Army Marksmanship Unit. Like that's who's our director of special projects. And there are a couple of other personnel announcements that we're about to make that are pretty high profile. But I mean, we're building a team because we don't intend to, like, we're not trying to get by. We're very much gearing up to go out and crush.
Yeah, yeah. Let's prepare to take ground. We're not
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to hold.
we're not holding ground. We're taking ground. And yeah, you're right. The rest of the gas gun black rifle industry this year was severely depressed. We saw an explosion, but it's also because we had something truly novel and better to bring to market. The Sons Liberty's growth in a very down year has a lot to do with the fact that we brought something to market that's objectively better, and that's it. There's no shortage of Mark 1 buyers.
It's got to feel nice, you know. You love to see the purchase orders rolling in like that.
My prayer, listen, man, my prayer is just like, please don't, God, please don't let me fuck this up. No matter how bad the stress is or how much I'm traveling, I'm gone all the time these days, and it's longer trips, less downtime at home. Yeah, but I feel like we have there's a narrow window where you have a little bit of momentum. You have the wind at your back. You got to go push. You got to go make hay. And so the stress of that, the anxiety of being in some of these programs where your rifles are being tested and stuff like that, the anxiety of wondering how that's going to go. I mean, that's a lot, dude. I mean, your life's dream is being judged like under a true microscope, but dude, these are all the problems I prayed for. So like, I don't complain. I mean, life has not gotten easier. It's gotten harder, a lot harder, but these are the problems I prayed for, man. And so I'll take it.
Yeah, it's the business entrepreneur's kind of curse is like you start off and it's like you have $1,000 problems and you pray for $10,000 problems, and before you know it you find out that like $1,000,000 problems are terrifying compared to 10 that you'd trade anything to go back to those $10,000 problems.
Yeah, no, that's the truth, man. But again, I'm very excited. I'm definitely looking in the windshield, not the rear view.
Well, I'm very excited to see where you guys are headed, and I know that there's going to be good cause for us to probably do a follow-up video here in the first part of the new year, because I'm sure there's a lot more things by the time SHOT Show rolls around. I'm confident there's more announcements coming from you. So I guess is kind of like a winding it down direction. We've talked about a lot of the misconceptions that you've seen circulating on the web or you've heard in some of the different circles. Are there any frequently asserted misunderstandings that you wanted to play whack-a-mole with, where it's like, let's put a thumb on these stupid thoughts and put them to rest?
Yeah, no. So there are people that that are convinced and believe that like Sons Liberty barrels are made by a certain OEM or something. I can tell you that people have no idea how Sons Liberty barrels are made at this point. But I suppose soon enough they'll probably find out. I know that people are would be surprised to know that we go straight to the mill, like the steel mill. We're buying raw materials, that we have the material certifications on every raw material that we're using. Matter of fact, at this point we have to. Right. And you're going from like true raw material to a novel barrel. The performance of those barrels is undeniable. This is not just Mike's opinion. I mean, go look at how those barrels are doing across the internet for people that actually shoot. Yeah, I think Preston Moore had a really cool video. I think he might have some more coming out. But I mean, like, so, like anybody who has an IQ high enough to like manage their own affairs knows that some of the barrel reputation issues are unfounded. They were never founded to begin with. We never, like, out of like all the rifles, barrels, and upper halves that are floating around, which are well over 100,000. you don't really see performance complaints, right? But I mean, but now at this point, like what we're doing is very different. The fact that we're just assemblers, that's not true. We actually engineer, design, invent, prototype, test, validate. There's mod A, Rev B, Rev 3, whatever it is. Like, before something comes to market, at this point, it's probably been in testing and development for, for at least, at a minimum of at least a year. Some of the things we've accomplished for awards and contracts were not, arbitrary end of the year spending. This wasn't something to test. I'm trying to think of some of the more. Someone asked me if I was going to get sued by HK because I'm using Armod steel, and only HK has the right to use Armod steel. That's funny because I work with the engineers at Duval, like one on one. Like we're on the phone at night, talking about what we found with different heat treats and plating and stuff like that, and stress relief. So, like, I didn't do this behind anybody's back. The reason why Armod steel is not more currently used is, number one, it's expensive as shit. It's very hard to work with. It tears up your machines. It messes stuff up quite a bit. Very few companies have actually figured out how to make Armod barrels because of how, like, the stress relief and the very specific types of heat treat, all that kind of stuff to go with it. And the companies that have figured out how to use Armod, they're in no hurry to release it to the commercial market because it's completely overkill unless you're going to feed it something that doesn't technically exist yet. So, I wanted to address that. No, HK is not going to sue us. Let's see what else.
There's some real disappointed gun guys on the internet now because you said that.
Yeah, dude. Like, oh well, like there's nothing. It's just another AR-15. I would pick an AR-15, any AR-15 that you wanted to compare it to as an apples to apples thing, and go through it with the with as many metrics as you could possibly throw at it. Now, if you're doing that off of a picture on the internet, that probably doesn't do it service. If you get your hands on one and you actually kind of understand why all of those things are where they're at and what they do, go shoot it, whatever else. Let me just close with this. The AR-15 platform, the AR-15 family of guns, is going to be around a long time. I know that there's a lot of talk about the XM7 and about, or the M7 and about the stuff that, like, it's looked at by the Army. I can tell you right now that the AR-15 is not going anywhere anytime soon. And there was probably a lot of effort from a lot of very smart people on how to bring that rifle into the next gen. And you know what? Some companies, not gonna wink wink, some companies already have. Some companies have already brought the AR family of weapons into the legit next gen. So, and other companies to follow soon, I guarantee it. It's a really I would put the next 5 years of small arms tech up there with any other milestone in firearms history. I would say that what's happening now is as important as the invention of rifling, as the invention of smokeless powder, as the invention of the cartridge, the repeating arms. What's happening right now is going to be one of those tick marks on the timeline of weapons tech that's going to be exciting.